welcome to the second stop in our virtual Whistle Stop Tour series. My name is Nikki Johnson, Executive Director of the North Carolina Small Grain Growers Association. And although you can't be with us in person in the field today, we're happy to have you watching from the comfort of your own home. Today we are in sunny Willard, North Carolina, here in Pender County, where the topics discussed today will include nitrogen top dress and wheat yield estimations. So we hope that you enjoy today's videos and continue to watch the tour as we make our way through North Carolina. I want to thank NC State University and Dr. Angela Post and her team for continuing the research and filming these field days so that you still have the information that you need to help on your farm. I also want to thank the farm collaborator, Farrior Farms, and the county agent, Mark Seitz, for allowing us to film today. We hope that you enjoyed today's Whistle Stop Field Day, and it will be published in the weekly Wheat Beat, as well as our website, ncwheat.com, and on our NC Small Grain Growers Facebook page. So be sure to check it out, let us know what you think, share with other people, and as always, if there's anything that we can do to help, just please let us know. Thank you and stay safe.
Good morning, I'm Mark Seitz. I'm the Pender County Cooperative Extension Director. I'm also the field crops agent for Pender County, and I work with commercial fruit and vegetable farmers here as well. Today we're out at Keith and Andrew Farrier's farm in Willard, North Carolina, looking at wheat, but I wanted to give you a little background on Pender County. It's a county of about 400,000 acres. We have about 350,000 acres of timber and swampland, and about 35 to 40,000 acres of tillable cropland and pasture. Corn and soybeans are our big acreage crops. We do about 15,000 of each of those annually. Somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 acres of wheat is planted every year, depending on prices and depending on crop rotation. But Pender is also a big blueberry production county. We have about 1,700 acres of blueberries in the county, and we're number 2 in the county, in the state, for that crop. Bladen County west of us has about 3,000 acres. It's been a tough 3 or 4 years in this county. We've had 2 hurricanes. The worst one was Hurricane Florence, dropped about 35 inches of rain on us in a 4-day period. That got followed up by a long, wet summer. And then last year we had temperatures in mid-May in the high 90s, and it lasted through much of July. And so crop production has just been really, really difficult the last few years. And having said that, we still have some successes. We had a couple of fields last year that were entered in the state corn yield contest. That one in Pender County pushed 270 bushels, and 2 miles down the road it was 50 bushel corn. So it's just Mother Nature blessed that farm at that point in time. We also had some very good wheat crops last year. We had a number of high yield entries over the 100 bushel mark, and it's so wheat's becoming a little more important. I think growers here are looking at it more as a higher cash crop than just a cover crop or just a rotation crop, and hopefully it'll, with some better management and just more familiarity with some of the newer research, we'll be able to help them keep those yields up in the closer to the 100 bushel range so they can hopefully make better money. Also in Pender County we have a large pork and poultry industry. I talked about the acreage that we do. That acreage all supports these livestock producers. Most of the grain produced here goes to the pork and poultry farms. Our industry does, agriculture in general does about $150 to $170 million of production annually. It varies with prices and rotations. Livestock is probably 100 to 120 of that annually, and the majority of it is large commercial farms contracted with the big meat processors. We do have some small independent, small on-the-ground producers that are doing free-range chickens and free-range pork and that kind of thing, selling to local markets and local farmers markets. But I think in 2018, Pender County was about 19th or 20th in the state in total agriculture production.
Hi, my name is Andrew Farrior.
I'm Keith Farrior.
And this is Farrior Farms. And we tend about 500 acres of corn and beans, about 110, 120 of wheat. And we've been on this one farm for 5 generations now. And we've got gravestones we found, and our history goes back to the early 1700s. It's a lot of heritage and a lot of hard work's going into it, and we really enjoy it, making good crops.
Well, I just hope that we can get everything back in order here as far as our markets.
Yeah,
like everything's
that's terrible.
on the down right now, and we need to make it look a little more optimistic for the future, to see some prices go up a little bit. Because right now everything is below cost of production. So we need to see some improvement, and hopefully that will come before long. You think that you have been through it all, you get to the age I am, but every year something different I haven't seen before. Production wise, I guess we're about where we normally would be. There's been little problems, but no big ones. But it's just the economic side of it. We need to see things improve. The field that we're standing in right now, the band around the field, we changed seed in this field, but the band around it's Hilliard, and the rest of the field is USG 3536. And when we got a stand, it was good conditions to plant in, and we planted it timely.
Yeah.
But and it came up, but then it got wet, and
wheat doesn't like wet feet.
This field wasn't probably a good wheat field because it does hold moisture, and there's a circle down in the field that didn't do well, and we tried putting early application of nitrogen. Put some 37% just on a test plot. We flagged out equivalent to an acre, and anyway, we tried that at about would have been 30 pounds to the acre maybe, and 35 pounds, and anyway, we didn't get any results from it. The wheat was drowned, I think, in that area, and it didn't bring it out any better than the areas that we didn't put in. So
wheat just doesn't like wet feet. Yeah.
I think putting early application helps, when you have a good stand and a healthy stand. But as far as bringing out an area that's been damaged by the water, I don't think, I didn't see any results from that. So it's and the rest of the wheat looks pretty good. This is just some land that's not as suitable for wheat.
We're out here today in Pender County at Farrior Farms, and we're taking a look at this USG 3536. This variety is well adapted to North Carolina, and it does very well across the state. In fact, in statewide yields, it has performed well over the last 3 years if you look back at OVT data. So we would expect high yields here if we were able to get it planted on time, have a nice winter season, and also get it top dressed on time. But as many of you know, here in North Carolina, we had an extremely wet winter, and we also had trouble getting into the fields after we started to green up. So it was challenging to get all of those things to line up appropriately for high yielding wheat. So we're going to take a look here at this field today, and we're going to go to a field that's looking a little bit better and faring better for yield estimations. This particular field behind me is looking like it's going to be around the state average, somewhere between 50 and 55 bushels per acre, but that's not what the grower would want in this field. They would typically have a farm average above the 65 to 70 bushel mark, but would want individual fields that would be hitting that 80 and 90 and maybe even 100 bushels per acre. It's going to be challenging to hit those numbers this year because we had such a wet winter. You heard them talk earlier about the challenges they've faced over the last few years with hurricanes, and then also with very wet seasons that they would not normally expect in this part of the country. So we face those challenges, we do the best we can, but what Mother Nature throws at us, we really have to be creative about the way we manage. There was a very small window back in January where we could have gotten in for early splits, but it was still challenging with top dressing to get in with the on-time split that would happen sometime in late February and early March. Right now in the state, we're about 2 weeks ahead of where we normally would be if we look at historical temperatures for the last 30 years. We're about 2 weeks ahead of schedule for heading and getting ready to have grain fill. Most of the wheat in this field is in the milk stage, just getting ready to go into soft dough. And we have had very good spring temperatures for grain fill, so the grains that are out here on these heads, while there are fewer of them than what we would normally expect, we should still see them fill out well and make test weight grain if we're able to harvest on time. And that is the key piece that we look for. We've had so many things in this season that have kept us out of the fields and caused us to be behind where we would normally be. The hope is that we'll have some nice weather for that June period where we would be out and about harvesting and getting ready to deliver that grain to the elevators. There is another area in this field that we're going to take a closer look at where when the wheat came up, we became wet very quickly, and that wheat did not tiller appropriately, and we can still see that in the field here today because it had to be skipped during the top dress. So when we think about nitrogen top dress in North Carolina, I would say that a good majority of growers are probably still putting their nitrogen top dress on just a little bit on the late side. And when I say that, I'm talking about that final split. If you split your nitrogen, many times growers are waiting to see that first joint above the soil surface before they go and put their nitrogen top dress on. While the wheat is still taking up nitrogen actively at that time, it's not, the ideal timing would be just prior to that joint coming above the soil surface or right at that time. If you wait until your first joint is up and you have a lot of acres to cover, by the time you get across all of it, you will be squarely in jointing, and it'll be a little bit late for getting the majority of that nitrogen into those plants. So another piece we think about in top dressing is putting on an early split. This year in North Carolina, or this growing season, 2019-2020 wheat growing season, I made lots of recommendations in the fall to put on a very early split of nitrogen. And when I say very early, I mean late December to early January. The reason for this is because we had an extremely wet season, and a lot of the nitrogen that either was left over from residues from previous crops or applied at the time of planting was already gone by the time we got into late December. I had some growers who were concerned about making that application early with fears that their wheat would grow too fast and mature too quickly as we come into spring green up. And I wanted to cover a basics about wheat. We look at our other crops with regard to heating units and how those heating units impact the maturity and the growth of that crop. Wheat is really no different, even though we typically don't think of it in those terms. The heating units that accumulate in the spring as we move from the beginning of January and through to green up are the heating units that are going to matter when it comes to when that first joint is going to come on and also when that wheat is going to head. And if you look at over the last 3 years, we have had wheat heading in a different window in each of the last 3 years, okay? It's not a simple concept of how long that wheat has been in the ground, but how many heating units accumulate and how quickly they accumulate. And each variety has a different heading date depending on how many heating units are required to reach heading. The same is true for jointing, but we haven't modeled that in North Carolina yet. So the main point that I want to drive home here is, yes, you may see additional vegetative growth if you make an early split. And in your mind, that might make you think that you have pushed that wheat's maturity a little farther ahead. But in fact,
If you had two fields that were planted on the same day and they were across the road from one another, and one farmer had that early split on in December and the other farmer waited, the farmer who put the early split on in December would be heading at the same time as the farmer across the street, and likely jointing at the same time as the farmer across the street. But he might have the opportunity to have built more tillers earlier by having that early split out there. So I'll always recommend pushing your wheat a little bit and making sure you're feeding it on time rather than worrying about what you're doing to the maturity of that wheat, because like other crops, it's related to heating units and not your management practice. The things that cause wheat to mature at a particular time in the spring are heating units and planting date. So my main recommendation for farmers when they're selecting varieties to plant on farm, especially if you have a large number of acres to cover, is to make sure you spread your maturities out so that you don't have to harvest all of that wheat at one time, and also you don't have to plant it all at one time. So you're going to choose an assortment of varieties from early to late and spread those out on your fields accordingly, and make sure you remember which ones you planted where so that you can plan your harvest accordingly. In general, when we start in mid to late October, we're going to plant our later maturing varieties first, because it's going to take them longer to get to maturity. And then the further along we get in the season, the later and later we plant, we're going to move to those medium and earlier maturing varieties as we get later into the season. If you reference the Small Grain Growers Guide for North Carolina, you'll find that information there, and you'll also find appropriate planting dates for each one of those groups of varieties. What that allows you to do is to harvest in a timely manner for each one of those, and also to spread your risk. We usually in North Carolina will see a yield improvement with early maturing varieties if and only if we can make it through the spring without a late spring freeze. Because those earlier maturing varieties, even though we plant them later, are still going to be heading earlier and more susceptible when we have those freeze events we already talked about today. But if we make it through that season and we're able to get that wheat out without a freeze on it, remember it's had cooler temperatures both in the day and the night, and many times a rainier period during grain fill that has allowed those grains to fill out better and make better test weight. So earlier maturing varieties can see a yield improvement or a yield gain in North Carolina if we have conducive weather to that. In the last 3 weeks, we have had a couple of weekend nights where we had very cold temperatures. Not severe freezes, but right around that freezing mark. And at that time, many areas around the state were either in boot or just at the heading stage and starting to flower. Those are stages where wheat is extremely susceptible to freezing temperatures, and right around that 32 mark, we can start to see some injury. That injury looks like individual kernels which are blasted. If it had been more severe, we would see full heads completely sterile and completely white. But the injury symptoms you want to be looking for in your fields based on the freezes that we had are individual kernels that are blasted, and that will turn the kernel and also, or the floret, and also the entire awn will be white or straw colored. And you can have that in the center of the head, or you can have it individually at the top of the head of wheat. And it will usually be 2 or 3 kernels, and it's those that were probably in flower or getting ready to pollinate at the time that freeze occurred. Because we had 2 different freezing temperature events and they were separated by several days, you may see blasting in multiple parts of your heads instead of all in one place. I haven't seen a lot of that in the fields yet, but it's possible that you would see it in your fields. If you have a bearded wheat, another way that you can tell that you have had freeze injury is the beards will not be nice and straight and evenly spaced with one another. They'll start to be curved or kind of crazy looking. They might go in all directions at the top of that head, and again they'll start to take on a straw colored appearance instead of their natural green appearance that they should have right now. We have not started to move into the dough stage, the soft dough and hard dough stage for most of the state. So you should not see any straw coloring in your heads yet. You may start to see yellowing down at the very base of your plants and that will move slowly up the plant as we move through grain fill and towards harvest. Another indication of freeze, which we're not seeing in this field, but we will show some still images here for that, are kinked heads, or heads that are bent and trapped in the collar region. So when your flag leaf is completely out, it has a collar right around the edge, and the awns will push up through that collar. If you have freeze injury or a freezing temperature at the time the head is emerging, then the awns can become trapped, but the rest of the head will still try to move through that collar region, and you'll end up with a head that is U-shaped or curved with the awns still stuck in the boot. And what happens when that occurs is usually the grains are all still viable. However, because the head is bent or curved, the grains on the underside of that curve will not fill properly because they don't have space to fill properly. So you'll still have good grains from the majority of that head, but you'll have a few that will not necessarily meet test weight or will be a lower test weight than the other grains in that head. So you don't want to see a lot of that in your field, and usually when you see that type of injury, it's sparse, few and far between, which is what we're seeing from the 2 freeze events that we had just recently in North Carolina. We have a freeze update on the Small Grains portal that you can use to scout your fields and see what kind of injury you're looking at.
My name is Don Rawls. I live in Pender County. I farm southeast of here, southwest of here, about 5 miles. I farm about 2,000 acres. We grow corn, wheat, and soybeans. This year we planted about 400 acres of wheat. Majority of the crop looks pretty good. We did have a scare with a frost when it was starting to head, but I think we've escaped that pretty good. We had some challenges getting top dresser down at the times we would like, but we were able to adapt and get it on at a later date. There's a lot about wheat that we've got to learn. That crop has always sort of been a crop that doesn't get the best management that I've done, and trying to learn how to grow wheat as a better managed crop, so it's a little bit more profitable. I like wheat. It fits in the rotation that we do. We grow corn and soybeans otherwise. Right now we're going to plant 1,000 acres of corn. We got 800 acres planted. Majority of it's up, and it's got a yellow look just simply because of the cold nature of the soils. Need some 1/10 to change that. It won't be long before we get into soybean planting. We'll plant some earlier beans, but majority will be mid and late soybeans. I'm a 4th generation farmer. I love agriculture, been in it, grew up in it, and it has its challenges. We are a coastal county. We've seen Cape Fear is the bullseye for the hurricanes, and we're very close to that. We farm and we live with that, and it puts some challenges to the way we farm sometimes. But there's nothing better than having a great crop and riding a harvester picking an abundant crop. And right now our country's in a lot of challenges with the COVID-19 and things, but we must maintain our food supply. This country is the greatest country it is because of that capacity. We've been able to feed ourselves and not depend on anybody else in the world to feed us. The day we lose that, we will become a susceptible nation. And my personal opinion, we must maintain a good food supply for this country that is safe and economical for the homeowner to have. I take a lot of pride in being a farmer and being able to help produce food and fiber for this country. And It's a different occupation, but has its challenges, but the rewards are also very great too. So you have to live with the swing of the up and down, and once you go through enough of the lows, you learn how to adapt and how to live with those. And I enjoy being a farmer. It's a challenge. The future of it is bright, but we've got to be able to address the commodity prices and the way food is paid for, so that we can have it. The farmer has got to be able to make a profit, and that is one of the biggest challenges we face right now.